Hey there, senior leader, and welcome to the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. I'm your host, Jackson Lynch, and today I am joined by my friend and co-host, Scott Morris, the founder of Propulsion AI. Scott, it's great to have you with us.
Great to see you again.
And today we're going to be tackling a very hard truth. You cannot fix a C-suite executive with performance management. If performance reviews really worked, Peloton wouldn't be selling bikes, they'd be selling board seats. Like, imagine it. 30 minutes a day on a stationary bike, and suddenly your CFO is fluent in capital markets and your COO has empathy. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
Hey, Jackson, before we really get going on this topic, which is a tough topic, let me ask for our audience's help in something. If you like this podcast, take a second and subscribe. Leave us a review, especially if you really like the podcast. 5-star reviews really help the algorithm. Share it with a colleague. This is how we keep this conversation going. We could use your help in that regard.
Yeah, thanks for that, Scott. And I also want to share that tomorrow in Atlanta at the SHRM Executive Network, I will be kicking off the Visionaries Conference. It's going to have about 400 of my favorite CHROs across the business landscape. And it'll be kicking off with Johnny Taylor and I at a fireside chat. We're going to be talking about the future of work and how to build teams that rise under pressure rather than collapse under confusion. So if you're going to be there, please come up, say howdy. I'd love to shake your hand and say hello.
All right, so this is a tough topic. Anytime, and in your opener, you said, performance reviews are a big challenge when it comes to executives. That can be interpreted a lot of different ways. Why don't we start out with you setting the stage for us on what the typical scene is that the CHRO is going to encounter?
Yeah, thanks for that. For most of us, it looks like this. It's a mid-cap company. It's in fast growth. And either the board or the CEO, the conversation tends to be the same. They've decided to bring in a seasoned operator as the new chief operating officer. On paper, that hire is flawless. You did all the work. You have a global track record, glowing references, very, very fine polish for boardroom activities. And early on, month 1, confidence is high. Month 3, the seams are starting to show. Direct reports are complaining about slow decisions, maybe mixed signals, a tendency to over-engineer. And by month 6, the CEO is waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking, I might have made a mistake. Revenue is still climbing, but the costs are drifting. The peers are bypassing the COO, and we're starting to get tighter and sharper questions from investors. So here's the punchline. No performance cycle, no annual review, and no 360 is going to fix this. Because I would argue a mishire is not a coaching issue when it's at the very top of the organization. It's a alignment issue. It's a judgment issue. And if you're a CHRO, this is where you must step up, not as the referee, not as the executioner, and not as the person that feels like they've been wronged, but as the CEO's partner to help navigate the risks, shape the options, and keep both the board and the business moving forward. And that's where a decision flow helps. And let me see if we can get this one up on the screen. Scott built this, and I think it looks great. Yeah, it's asking the question in sequence. Did we select correctly? Are the expectations clear? Is the role even doable as designed? And if not, what do you do? Role clarification sprint, maybe a role redesign sprint, or an expectations against adjustment sprint using the agile framework. And if none of those resolve the issue, the only real move is to have a fast track exit. So coming back, I know we just looked better with that thing on the screen instead of us. But Scott, let me ask the question. Why do we find ourselves in this situation? And why do CEOs often convince themselves that they can take their time and maybe one more quarter is going to fix it?
I mean, I think the most obvious answer to that is nobody, especially in the beginning, wants to admit that they were wrong. And by the way, I think there are a lot of reasons that they can be wrong, not just that person is a bad executive. The process could have yielded a flawed result, right? You could have gotten the wrong person in. But I think my short answer is nobody wants to admit that they're wrong, and I think that leads to a wait-and-see attitude rather than a decisive action attitude.
So why don't you just then let it play out? That's the safest route. And if lawyers were involved, they'd want us to to have lots of documentation, very clear expectations, and take our time and provide feedback and all that stuff that we do with most employees. I'd argue that doesn't make any sense for executives, but I'm curious if you disagree.
Well, I do disagree. And I think you've got a responsibility when you make a hire to ensure that that individual is set up for success. But that means that when the situation is not what you want, you've got to focus on the diagnosis. What's really happening here? And that's why that graphic that you just put up, I think, has some significance, because if you don't understand what the cause is, then you're risking making a bad situation worse. Harvard Business Review, and I'm going to have to go look again, Jackson, for the name of the article, but 10 to 15 times the salary is what an executive mishire is going to cost you. That's a huge cost. That's a lot different than making a mishire farther down the org chart.
So I totally am bought in that you have to design the role well. And congratulations, it was about 6 minutes before we talked about outcomes.
That's our fastest one.
That's where we start.
Right.
But I'm going to push back. I don't think you can performance manage your way out of a C-suite mishire. I think the better way of approaching it is to frame a decision tree. First, did we even select correctly? And that, yes, assumes that you've designed the role well. And that isn't always the case. And maybe that's where you look. But presuming that you've designed the role well, you've been clear about the outcomes, and you've designed it in a way that is achievable for the person you thought you hired. At some point, you make your expectations clear. And if they're not working, then you got to make a clean outcome. Clean exit is, I think, the best outcome. Why do you disagree with that?
Well, so first of all, I don't disagree about being decisive when it's time to be decisive. But when I listen to you, it's very hard for me to not hear that is performance management. Here's the one situation. Well, I actually, let me not misspeak on that. I think there are two situations where you and I would agree. If there is a skills problem, if this individual just does not have the skills to get the job done, you need quick and decisive action on that.
I'd agree.
The counterpart to that is if you have a will problem, you've been clear about the expectations, you've designed the role appropriately, the job is doable, you've seen bad behaviors, you've confronted those behaviors, and all of those things, by the way, my only disagreement with your point is I think that is performance management. Declaring those things and fixing the pieces of the process that may not be right, that is performance management. But if you get to the end of that and you've got an executive who just says, that is not what I'm going to do, that's when you have to take decisive action. And waiting past that point is where you start to rack up a lot of costs.
I think that's where early career CHROs get put in a really tight spot. And I've talked about the loneliness of the role. This is an example where that comes into play. And I've talked at great length, I think, of the fact that you're the ultimate outsider while you're also the ultimate insider. And that also comes into play here, because part of your job is to help the executive. But another part of your job is to make sure that you're driving the dynamics of the senior team and being the consigliere area of the CEO to make the tough call. And in my experience, both directly and with clients that I help coach, what normally happens is everything's fine, and then the CEO is fed up, usually because something happened and they've now made a decision that they need to make a change. And the very next words out of the CHRO's mouth is, okay, hey, slow down. We need to take and be thoughtful on a process. But the question in my mind is not how do you fix it? It's either how do you realign with minimal business risk or exit with minimal business risk. At CEO level, to your point on the HBR article, like you don't have time to muck around.
Yeah. You wrote a really great piece that I saw on LinkedIn, but I know is on the Substack as well, that I think people should check out. And it's on alignment and, the relationship between the CEO and the CHRO and that alignment between the two. And that's going to lead to fast, decisive action because it's going to lead to a partnership that spots that dysfunction coming early. And I think if people haven't read it, I think they ought to read your article. It's a really good piece.
Oh, I appreciate that. And one of the things that kind of came out early, and as I was thinking through what would go into that article is we have some questions to ask. One, have we actually made expectations clear? CEOs don't always do that as a natural course of action. You would like them to. You would think that they should be able to. But I found myself having to have those conversations usually in the hiring process. And if by the way, you end up having a job design that shifts in the process of going through the interviews, well, that should be point one, that you might have a clarity issue. And if so, we have an opportunity and obligation to make sure that we are sharing clearly with the new executive what needs to happen for them to be successful. But I guess in your view, why don't we just have the executive figure it out? Like, most of these senior executives have been around the block. They've worked in different companies.
Yeah.
Why should they be able to figure it out?
Well, so first of all, if we made a really good hire, if we had all of those things that you just said, yes, they are going to figure it out, because nobody comes into a job without a little bit of zigzagging in the beginning as they're starting to really understand the organizational dynamics and the politics of the C-suite and the agendas of the people involved, et cetera, right? So I think the individual should be, and there needs to be personal responsibility from that person figuring it out. But think about each of us as a supervisor. Think, regardless of organizational hierarchy, right? One of the responsibilities we take on in managing the work of other people, whether you're a CEO or a frontline, first year supervisor, is that you are a coach. And when you think about what a really good coach does, a good coach sits back and says, hey, move your elbow in a little bit and follow that through when you're doing it. They see the things that you don't see. And so you can't just say that executive is going to figure it out. That's hand washing. That is abdication of responsibility and saying, I'm not going to deal with it. That person will deal with it, right? You've got the responsibility to come in and say, hey, you're not showing up the way that I know you can show up. And again, I come back to, I think that's performance management. It's not a PIP. It's not a written plan. And you and I would agree that's ridiculous at the executive level. But it is confronting what we see as the dysfunction that is at the root of the non-performance and saying, you got to fix this. And now we're in that binary situation again, where we can say, like, you got confronted with it, but you don't want to change it. Now we're going to take decisive action. And that's where the CHRO's got to be there to support the CEO.
Yeah, I would argue that role clarification sprint, and let me just define what I mean by that. It's when you sit down with the supervisor and the employee, the executive involved, and you line out what good looks like. And ideally, it's the 5 to 7 outcomes where if you do these things and only these things, back to the top grading methodology, you are considered successful in role. And then it's a matter of, are you doing that to a degree that has consistent performance that allows you to be considered an A player. And if you go through that process, that should clear the box and it should be checked off. In a perfect world, you've done it before they ever started. In a perfect world, you have communicated that on their way in the door, if not sooner. Yeah. But once you've done that, like, what happens next? Like, do you if you have someone's job design is fine, but then they start missing KPIs, like, does that mean that the leader's failing? What do you do then?
Well, I mean, let's make some further potential assumptions here, right? Is the job design is fine. Have we set the stage? Like, are the objectives reasonable? Don't know. I mean, in our fictitious example, they are, and the person isn't performing, but that's not always the case. So that's where that next tier is: the job doable? Are the not the expectations muddled, but are the results actually achievable? Because a lot of times when we're bringing in hires that we think are going to radically change things, we've waited a little bit long sometimes, right? And the situation, we're feeling the pressure within the business. And we're looking at this person and saying, well, this person's going to fix it. Well, I don't know. Have we given them something that is, a timeline that's achievable? I think that's the next question.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And you got to time box your patients though, right? There are metrics, and again, if you follow the top grading methodology, you have a here's what I would expect to happen over the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 180, and full year. And if you define that well, you can tell whether someone is on path. And why is it that senior executives fail? And by the way, when you hire a senior executive into your company, the failure rate is really, really,
Yeah.
really high. Why? Either you've designed the job poorly. Okay, that's a quick fix. You have made a mishire relative to that job. That one you need to get your arms wrapped around quickly. Or what you or what you have is a timing challenge. They're doing the right things, but they're moving too slow. Well, that's feedback that you can provide. And then the fourth is they are doing it in a way that you can't allow. And leaving dead bodies from point
Behavior.
A to point
Right.
B, behavior stuff, judgment stuff.
Yeah.
Am I collaborating on decisions, or am I going wildly into the future by myself? Like, I think all of those allow you know the appropriate protection of shareholder confidence, but that's where the CHRO has to lean into those conversations with the boss. Because remember, by the time the CHRO normally gets involved, the CEO is now at a point where, candidly, they're making it's me or that person, and that how do you navigate through that, Scott? You've been there.
Well, let me flip that question though to you, because the question I have is, how do you know when you're cutting too quickly? How do you know as a CHRO when you're not slowing down enough? Right? You and I both agree on the penalty for indecision and the penalty for being too slow. How can you tell when you're going too fast? To your point about what as a CHRO what you're going to encounter, which is frustration from your CEO.
Yeah, this is where having a strong, trusting relationship with your CEO makes all the difference. And I think the way I would look at it is, have I defined the role in a way that is clear and expectations are reasonable? If that answer is no, you should fix that before you take another step.
Yeah.
If it is, if we have shared with the executive those things and the ramp up timelines are appropriate, you and I are, I think, going back and forth on how to define performance management. Like, sure, having a conversation, clarity of expectations there. What I'm saying is, you don't say, okay, you have 30, 60, 90 days to go improve this metric, and I'm going to give you 4 pieces of feedback on a biweekly basis. None of that stuff.
Right.
You are better off making a hard decision faster. Um, and I'd honestly, I'd rather cut more quickly once you reach the conclusion, rather than going through some sort of theater in order to feel better about the process. When you've made the call in your head, long goodbyes aren't helpful. Like,
Right.
get on with it, because what's happening is, if you are seeing that, the people below you in the organization are seeing that, your A players are seeing that, and they're auditing your culture all the time. And in a situation like that, most of your decisions are to support someone who is not engaged in driving the business forward at the speed we need. Those guys know that.
Yeah.
And so while the CEO is saying it's me or the person, those folks are saying it's that person or me too.
Let me answer my own question that I was asking you, and I'll give you kind of my gauge for that as well, which is
Because I didn't answer your question. Is
no,
that was confused?
no, because I think mine is going to like amplify your answer,
Oh
because
yeah,
we may
fair enough.
disagree about what performance management is, but I think we clearly agree on this, which is you're not cutting too fast if you have honestly and openly declared the issues and they are going unresolved still. Right. And I think the dysfunction that I've seen so many times is that we're so hesitant to get out there and say, hey, look, first of all, here's how you need to show up. Here's how you are showing up. And I don't understand why. And help me to understand that, because it's not going to be acceptable for it to go any farther. Right. We don't want to have that conversation, which can be a hard conversation to have. And so we don't have that. And then we want to cut them. That's cutting too quick. But if we come in and we have that open and honest conversation, we declare it early, and there isn't a change, then we're not cutting too quick. And I think on that, it sounds like between your answer and mine, we agree.
Yeah, and a lot of the CHROs I've coached over my last couple of decades, it we don't always reach the conclusion that we need to move as quickly as the CEO does. And I'd ask us to think about that a little bit, because again, we play the role of employee advocate very strongly, but we also have an overarching role, which is to make sure that the people in the most important seats are doing what we need to do for the business going forward. And oh, by the way, if you cut the first one and then you find yourself in the exact same position the second time, okay, that finger points right back at you. Okay, so this isn't just a move forward without any accountability for the upfront decisions. We got to do that as well, but it can be I think challenging. Run the sprint and then act. And by the way, in my view, if values or judgment are the gap, like, move on, because you're not going to be able to say that. So Scott, let me maybe twist this a little bit and ask you to think about how to make this pragmatic for CHROs that might be in this spot. Like if you're sitting CHRO and your supervisor comes to you with this kind of a situation, kind of what's your playbook?
Okay, so first of all, I think the first move is you got to be ahead of them, right? If you're reacting to that, if you're not seeing it, then you got to ask yourself the question, are you sufficiently in the business? It's not just the CHRO, and I think are not the CEO exclusively's role to think about executive performance. And I think that's a point you just made a second ago, right? The CHRO has to be looking at those executives, and you have to have an opinion, right? You also have to have an opinion about what the dysfunction is, so that when that CEO comes and says, I think we made a mistake, you can say either, let's test that assumption by clearing up the following or by exploring the following. Or you can say, yeah, you may be right. Let's declare this and start coaching that CEO on how to have that conversation that is what I described a second ago. Here's how I need you to show up. Here's how you are showing up. Here are the pieces that aren't acceptable. Here's the change that I need. Help me to understand the situation, right? And not every CEO is going to have that conversation as comfortably. So I think point one of my now long answer is be ahead of it. Point number two is have your own opinion about what's going on with it. And three is be in a position to coach that CEO on that next step.
Yeah, and let me lean on that piece, because you sparked something for me, Scott, that I think is really, really helpful. I've lived through this personally, where the issue is the person aligning with the team as fast as they need to. And then I've seen situations where that answer is no, but it's not the new executive. it's the folks that feel like they have gotten a reduced role, or they're they think that this is fraternity hazing, or various other assumed positive intent reasons. But it's possible that the issue isn't the new person. The issue is how the balance of the team is there, and that's a lean in you have to have with your CEO at the same time, don't you think?
I 100% agree. And to even the setup that you created for this entire conversation, right? I think one of the key factors was you're moving fast. You brought somebody in because you need to change the trajectory even further of the business. Breaking eggs and making omelets are two different things. And when we bring somebody in and when we know that they're going to break some eggs, right, there's a difference between you're leaving a swath of dead bodies and you're making some decisions that people don't like. And I think as CHRO, you've got to play the role of balancing that and providing perspective to the CEO so that CEO can see both sides without paralyzing action, by the way.
Yeah. And let me make a personal reference to something I experienced earlier in my career, where I had my kind of first executive dose stop. The challenge wasn't my skills. The challenge wasn't my desire. The challenge wasn't the clarity. The challenge, unfortunately, was I thought you did alignment the way PepsiCo did alignment. And I wasn't at PepsiCo anymore. We did it differently there. That's an example where having a skill difference was really a definition of how work got got done. That's something that was fairly easy once I became aware of it, to make an adjustment, because I was starting at the how do we get it done stage, and everyone else is wondering, why are we doing this stage? And so that's where a CHRO, I think, to your earlier points that are spot on. It's not a, okay, the CEO said this, let me go execute. Nor is it the, hey, the CEO said this, let me slow them down, because it's going to be a pain to replace this role. Nor is it a, yeah, this guy was a jerk to me, so let me take this moment to pile on and address some of my personal pain involved in the situation. But at the end of the day, this is where we're having the switch. You got to be ready to flip the light switch off faster with this role, I think, than almost anything else.
In your story a second ago, Jackson, you said something that caught my attention, and it was the phrase, when I became aware of it. How did you, in that situation that you were thinking about, how did you become aware of that difference?
I asked, because I kept being told that I was moving too fast. So I didn't know what that meant. So I started talking slower. That didn't solve it. I started having more chit chat and being friendly before I moved fast. That also didn't handle it. Didn't solve it. What it was I finally went back to my CEO and members of my team and say, I hear you saying this. I sense you feeling this. I don't know what I need to be doing differently in order for me to move forward together. And and ultimately that kind of humility of, look, I want to fix this with you, and
Yeah.
I understand what we're solving for. Uh, that made a substantial difference. And the really funny part is, it's only after you have a toe stub like that the light bulb goes on. I was having a conversation with an executive that just left PepsiCo last week, and I said, let me give you some unsolicited counsel, and as you get into this job, here's the big watch out, because especially with places like PepsiCo that have a very clear and strong culture, it's not the same as it is other places, and so you got to be thoughtful about it. So the short answer to the question is a little bit of humility and a desire to win, which required me to figure out what it was that I was doing that was getting in my own way.
See, and I what I like about the story is I do think people can be saved with the right scaffolding. Some people can be saved. And I think that's why it's so important to really diagnose and understand what's the cause of what's going on here. Is it just simply a lack of clarity, or is this a matter of will? Because you want to act very quickly and decisively on one, and you want to take a little bit of time and work with the person for the sake of the expense, the cultural cost of of changing kind of horses early on, board confidence even, etc. I think it's really important to understand first and then act.
Alrighty, team, it's summary time, or as Scott always says, the only real metric that matters is how many board members like me after the board meeting is over.
I wish they could see me in the podcast rolling my eyes at that comment. Do I get to do the summary?
You do, and to be clear, as far as I'm aware, Scott has never said that before in his life. So let's hit us with a summary.
All right, 4 points. Tell me how I do. I think first one is a mishire isn't a coaching problem; it's a decision problem. You've got to use the flow. You've got to understand what's going on, clarify, readjust, redesign, and then adjust. But you need to do it in sprints, and you don't get more than one sprint per executive. Finally, values and judgment gaps are right to an exit. Performance management isn't going to repair those. Last point, and I guess this is the last point of 4, which is the CHROs have to be the CEO's navigator. They've got to show the board that there's a disciplined process. They've got to help that CEO to act decisively but fairly.
Yeah, and to your point, to see it coming so that they don't get
Great at
surprised. So how did you do? Well, outside of your inability to count to a very robust 4, I thought that was a wonderful summary, Scott. So
thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you to everyone else for tuning into the Talent Sherpa podcast, which is where, of course, senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. And a quick shout out to one of our favorite listeners. Hey, Chloe. Thank you for being a part of the Talent Sherpa community.
Hey, I said it at the very beginning of the podcast, and I'll say it again. If you like today's episode, please hit that like button. That helps us with the algorithm. Subscribe to the podcast. And you can always leave us a review on your favorite platform, whether that is Apple Podcasts or Spotify or even YouTube if you want to see what the two of us look like.
Yeah, we changed our image summary because someone said we wanted to see what you guys look like versus these caricatures. So let us know if we're too ugly for your phone. We'll change back to pretend avatars. But if you are a CHRO wondering where to start your AI journey, please don't forget to check out Scott Morris's company at Propulsion AI. You can find that at www.getpropulsion.ai. They are transforming how smart companies turn HR insights into powerful outcomes.
And if you are an emerging or even a brand new CHRO and you are ready to accelerate your impact, then head on over to mytalentsherpa.com. We've got resources designed specifically to help you navigate, elevate, and deliver results from day one. You can also sign up for and I'm glad that we get to say this, the best-selling Talent Sherpa Substack there. So
it's hard to say that 5 times fast, but we'll do it. So until next time, keep raising the bar, keep acting decisively, and keep on climbing.